Welcome to Garden Plants with Jim Putnam. Let's talk sky pencil hollies. This is Ilex crenata sky pencil. Sky pencil holly is a Japanese holly. Has the smaller leaves, and we think a lot of times when we think of hollies, they're have the broad leaves with the little pointy ends. But the Japanese hollies are little smooth-leaved plants. They look a bit like boxwoods. Sky pencil has a very fastigiate habit. This is a National Arboretum introduction, and it was released because you can plant this thing and it takes up a tiny little space in your garden, but you can get a lot of vertical height out of it. These can end up, I've seen them as tall as 12, 15 feet in height. Probably not a great idea to let them get that tall because they do kind of split open. They tend not to be able to support themselves at a certain height. And so I would probably think about keeping these in the 6 to 8 foot range. And another thing I'll do on them, as they grow, I'll take some of that growth off occasionally and allow some of this to thicken up down at the bottom to make sure it can support itself. They're evergreen and pretty much keep this look the entire year. They're not really changeable in the landscape. I think when we look at these Japanese hollies like this, we're not thinking of them as flowering plants, but they actually get lots of very small, slightly fragrant white flowers on them that bees absolutely love. It's amazing to me. We've got our entire garden at the house full of all these flowering things, and then we do have a couple of Japanese hollies, and when they bloom, the bees are all over them. These tiny little flowers. If you have a male Japanese holly near these, the flower will become a black fruit, and I see it sometimes, and other times again they just flower, and then the fruit is never set on them because there wasn't a male nearby. But the pollinators do enjoy them. The rate of growth on these is dependent on how much they're kind of liking the space. They can actually grow pretty quickly in a nursery setting like this. These are in, I think that's a 15-gallon container. That's maybe a 10-gallon container. I mean, they'll be here by fall. They'll be selling these, this wide and this tall by fall. Really fast growing when they're getting adequate moisture and everything that they need. In the ground, they're probably going to grow more like 6 to 8 inches in a single season, which isn't slow, but it's not that fast either. But in a container setting with a fertilizer and and enough water, really kind of fast growing. Where will these grow? You're going to see them listed zones 5 to 8. I've even seen some of these Japanese hollies listed 5 to 9. I think 9 may be a little hot for them. Let me know if you're in zone 5 and you have a sky pencil holly that's doing okay out in those conditions. Maybe 5B and not 5A. I don't know if there's a difference there, but you will see them listed zones 5 to 8. The sunshade thing is probably dependent on where you are. The cooler the area is, the more sun these will take. By the time you get down to zone 8, especially like 8B, I think they would appreciate a little bit of afternoon shade, part shade. Still need some direct sun to stay big and full and not stretch out and flop over. Let's cut it down to a half a day sun though. All right, so where are we going to use sky pencil hollies? Any place you need a vertical element that you don't have a lot of foot space. We have so many houses now with the sidewalks so close to the house that you end up with narrow spaces that you need tall things in. This definitely fits the bill for that type of thing. They can be used as a hedge or a screening plant, but you have to put them super close together. You almost have to dig a trench and just line them up in the trench in order to do that. I've seen it done, and it works. So that is a possibility. Of course, they can be tree formed. You can actually take some of the foliage off the bottom and turn them, and have them naked down at the bottom, have the foliage up at the top. You can do any kind of interesting thing you'd ever want to do with these. You could probably, bend them over and turn them into all kinds of interesting, strange things. Make great container plants. Keep in mind you're losing a zone probably if you're putting them in a container. So if you're in zone 6, probably not a great container plant. In zone 7, it would be just fine. I never really did a lot of protecting of my sky pencil hollies at the nursery because if we put some kind of cover over top of them, we would end up doing more damage to them with the weight or the snow that would get on them. So what we did was just put them pot to pot, and they were perfectly fine through the winter time, no problem. Like I say, with so many of these videos, moist, well-drained soil is best, and that's definitely true with these sky pencil hollies. They're just not very drought tolerant at all. They need you know, this is a plant that I just don't ever trust in the landscape. These are not very good. These Japanese hollies are not very good at letting you know when they're dry. And so they just all of a sudden start dropping leaves out of the blue, and then it's almost too late to save them, or it takes some period of time to save them after that. So this is one that you're going to consistently check on in the future. They don't mind clay soils, just mound them up just a bit in the clay soils. They like acid soils, they don't like alkaline soils. That's true with most hollies. That's why you'll see most fertilizers for acid-loving plants say things like holly tone or azalea camellia rhododendron holly fertilizer, that kind of thing, specifically for hollies. But again, this is a plant I'm going to put in the ground, and I'm going to monitor the watering on this one. If it becomes abnormally dry at any point, I will occasionally read something on these that says drought tolerant in time. No, just don't trust it at all. If you go through an abnormally dry period of time, this is one to check on. Overall, these are very low maintenance plants, but pruning is important on these. You need to slow them down. You need to kind of fatten them up a bit in order to gain some height in them. If you just sit here and let this plant just continue to grow and grow and grow up here, and it never broadens out, none of this ever thickens up at all, they really become victim to, you know, heavy snow, winds, rain, you know, they'll split apart like this. And so you know, for every foot of growth you get on one of these, I might take 6 inches of growth off of it. And it's literally the easiest pruning job you're ever going to do, just right across the top. If you get a crazy limb on the side, which you will sometimes, you can cut it off whenever. Pruning's probably best done late winter through spring into about midsummer, and then leave it alone after that. You want it to wind down and go dormant, you know, on its own, just kind of winding down naturally to the fall. If you do any pruning on it late summer into the fall, you can stimulate new growth that could end up damaged. Fertilizer, I'll fertilize everything in the garden once a year. If you have acid or you have a low pH already, you're going to find that they're already should have a nice rich dark green color, and you can just use whatever organic fertilizer you want to use. If you have slightly alkaline soil and you're seeing them yellow some, you probably want to use something like holly tone or something with an acidifier in the fertilizer. Pest wise, these are vulnerable to spider mites and a couple other issues, and I've always found it's related to stress. And so if they're underwatered, overwatered, you know, they're just in some sort of stressed conditions, that's when you see those problems show up on them. Otherwise, if they're vigorous, happy, actively growing, I don't really see any insect problems on them. So keep that in mind. If you're seeing insect problems, don't just think of it as an insect problem. Think about it as a total health of the plant problem, okay? That something's going on with it. It might need to be transplanted to another area. It may need more water than it's getting, may need less water than it's getting. Think through it that way, and I think you can eliminate those issues by just making the plant happier and able to fight those things off. So thank you guys very much for watching the Garden Plants with Jim Putnam channel. This is Sky Pencil Holly. Really easy addition to the garden to give you some vertical evergreen in a narrow space.